Gamer's Guide to Productivity. I'm your host, Nico Penguin, and today we have an exceptional guest with us. We have a PhD in the building, Dr. Bryan Samuel, an author, speaker, and an advocate for education, has an incredible journey from the projects to earning a PhD. His story is not just inspiring, it's a testament to resiliency, determination, and the power of education, something that I strive to speak to all gamers. So I'm thrilled to dive into a conversation converging diverse topics, including about student success, diversity, and a whole bunch of other things that include motivational insights regarding his book as well, Finding Myself, a journey from the projects to the PhD. With us today, Dr. Bryan Samuel. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Bryan.
Thank you so much, Nico. It's a pleasure to be invited. I always say you honor people with an invitation and they honor you when they show up. So we have honored each other.
And since you do have that doctorate in your name, very rare for gamers, anybody that's played a game to have that title in there. So I do want to know, first of all, what is your doctorate in and what made you go to school to earn that?
Wow. My doctorate is in educational leadership and higher education administration. I got it I earned it in 2005 from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. Go Cornhusker. And, when you ask me what made me want to go to school to get it, truthfully, the PhD had never crossed my mind until
Hmm.
1996. I was working a job in West Virginia, and one of the vice presidents called me to his office and asked me, what did I plan on doing in my career? Where did I want to go? What were my goals and aspirations? And I told him I wanted to be a vice president of a college or university, or maybe a president of a college or university. And he
Hmm.
said, I figured so. And I want you to pursue the PhD. And I said, man, I wasn't thinking about a master's, even though I got one,
Right.
right? It really wasn't on the radar for me. And he said, I figured you wanted to be a vice president or a president. And I'm here to tell you that you're never going to get there if you don't get the PhD. And so that started me on a 7-year journey to get admission into the PhD program. I applied many times, I interviewed several times, and all along the way, they told me, no, thank you. You're not good enough. You can never graduate. You're not going to make it. And we're actually doing you a favor by keeping you from starting down this road, knowing you're not going to graduate. Well, eventually, I got admitted. The man was getting ready to deny me. He interviewed me. I applied once and they denied me, and
Hmm.
then I applied a second time and they interviewed me, and he was gonna deny me, and he told me I couldn't write a dissertation. And I just so happened, having had all that experience of being rejected, I took all my papers and theses and all the things I had written with me, and I put them in front of him, and I said, well, everybody keep telling me that I can't write, that I'm no good as a writer, and that I'm never going to graduate. But when I take these classes, I get all A's. When I write
Hmm.
these papers, I get all A's. But you keep telling me that I can't write and I'm never going
Hmm.
to graduate. And I said, I don't think I'm the problem here. I think the problem is this admission process. You're looking at GRE scores and some of these other kind of things that are a bit problematic for people like me that grew up the way I grew up and that kind of thing. And so they admitted me, and the rest, as they say, is history. I went on and got my PhD. So I knew that without completing the PhD, my career aspirations, I've had the distinct pleasure of being a chief diversity officer and a vice president on several campuses, and that would not have been possible had I not got the PhD. So
Hmm.
that's about why, although I got to give credit to Dr. Irving Griffin at the West Virginia State University, who planted the seed. I wasn't even thinking about doing it. I kid you not. I wasn't until he called me to his office that day.
Wow. And despite the fact that you had to face adversity continuously, even in that moment, what led you to not give up? because a lot of people would have given up after the first or second no. Like, you know what? Maybe this is not for me.
Yeah, and that was hard, right? I toiled quite a bit just to get that admission, and when I got it, going to school in Nebraska was very rich, very rewarding, very challenging, but a lot of tornadic weather, you know, blizzards,
Mm-hmm.
different kind of
Mm-hmm.
things, very humid in Nebraska, and a lot of times classes would be canceled and I would have to drive 130 miles to class each way. So 260 miles round trip. And back in those days, Nico, we didn't have text messages to tell you that class was canceled, stay home.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go to school just in case classes were not canceled, right? So I couldn't be,
Dang.
I could not be that young black man that begged and pleaded for admission to this program and not show up for class.
Yeah.
So I had to stay on the road, and there were many reasons for not staying on that road. Right? I was working full time. Yeah, I had a
Mm-hmm.
family. Yeah, I was working full time. Yeah, I had to go to class from 5 to 10:30 twice a week, and then I had to drive back home. Like I said, it was 130 miles each way.
Yeah.
And then I had to go to bed and be back at work by 8 o'clock the next morning. And I did that for 3 years, man. And it was a beast. It was a beast. But I knew I could not reach my goals if I don't finish this program. And after going through all those interviews and all those applications to be admitted, I couldn't be that guy that didn't show up for class, and I could not be that guy that did all this. I mean, I went through a lot, Nico. I moved my family to Nebraska. Okay, from Tennessee to Nebraska, and after you go through all of that, you cannot get here, get into a program, did all that begging and pleading, and not graduate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a member of
Mm-hmm.
Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, and the last thing you want to do in my fraternity is be that brother that didn't graduate. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And so I had to just keep going. Wasn't nothing turning me around except death. Death was the only reason I could not finish, and ultimately I got it.
Now, for those that may not know your story, in the first portion of the title from the projects, what was your life like growing up, and what were some maybe example adversity situations that you had to face growing up?
It was, thank you for that question. It was like Nas said in his song Project Windows. Looking out my project window, I feel so uninspired,
Mm.
excuse me. And that's what it was every day. Hustlers, hoes, drugs, and fofos. This was the life of every kid looking at project windows, he said in his song. And coming up, we saw all of that, right? We had drug dealers, we had gangsters, right? We had drug addicts, we had crime almost in every direction that you could turn. But even despite all that, we still had a community. You still could borrow
Mm.
some sugar or a couple pieces of bread to make a sandwich or something like that. So Lonsdale was a very beautiful and special place, both when you think of it in terms of the roughness of it and then the tender side of it, if there was such a thing. I was born with prune belly syndrome, and prune belly syndrome back in 1970 had an 80% mortality rate.
Oh
And
my
pretty much
goodness.
what that meant was 80% of those people born with it died. And so coming up, I had a great deal of struggle in terms of just doing some of the normal activities because my body, I lacked those core muscles, stomach muscles, obliques, and things of that nature. So I had to
Mhm.
learn how to set up and walk and do some of those different kind of things without the benefit of the muscles that were supposed to be there to help me with those things. I was called a lot of names, jelly belly and prune belly and balloon belly, almost anything with a belly on it, right? So
Mhm.
that was a little tough. My mother was a single parent. She raised myself and my two sisters by herself. And you can imagine we had the commodities, the government cheese and pimento cheese and powdered milk and all that kind of thing. So it was special. The biggest challenge, though, was the school system. The school
Mm.
system was just outright just I don't really have the words for it. It was a huge challenge. We were just maybe 10 years past the civil rights movement and the desegregation of schools and stuff. I started school in 1976. So 12 years. We were 12 years out.
Mm.
And you know, the teachers were really harsh. They would say things like, "You ain't gonna be crap." You know, I don't know if you curse on your podcast or not, so I ain't gonna say the real words that they said. But they'll tell me you're gonna be dead or in jail. Make your F quietly. They speak to you almost any kind of way, man. And so it was a bit of a struggle. We had to walk to school from the time I was in the first grade. I was walking half a mile each way.
Oh my
Imagine
goodness.
that in 2024, you got a kid that's 5 or 6 years old and they got to go to school, and you're gonna make them walk half a mile, you know, to the school. And that's what we did. That's what we had to do. In junior high, we walked 2 miles each way. And
Dang.
when it came time to think about going to college and stuff, I think those elements were the basis for the admissions people deciding to actually admit me and give me a chance, because I painted that picture for them to say, wait a minute, you're looking at me. I made a 12 on the ACT, and you're looking at me from this standpoint that I can't do college, when what you should be thinking about, it's the standpoint that I'm still here and I'm still standing despite the drug affliction, despite the drive-by, the gang violence, despite the fact that my mother is a single parent raising 3 kids by herself, despite the fact that my father is doing life in penitentiary, despite my health and illness and all these other kind of things, I'm standing before you, graduating with a 2.3 grade point average, and I'm number 33 in my class, right? So that tells you something.
Mm.
I'm number 33 in the class with a 2.3 GPA. I said I can do these things. I can go to college. I can survive. And the problem was not one of doing well in school, but getting in. So it was a very interesting childhood, to say the least.
Wow, interesting is just such a understatement. Such a understatement. And I definitely would say a school system like that is, for me, the first word that came up was atrocious, because I went to a school system in Huntsville, Alabama, that did get shut down, and it was atrocious. The lack of care that teachers exhibited, the lack of support that they provided, and the fact that they would just literally tell you that you're not going to do anything based off of not only how you look, but where you're located. Like, nobody that lives here that goes to this school amounts to anything. Are you going to be the exception? And that makes me think, what mindset or what were you thinking that made you say, I'm going to be the difference maker?
Well, candidly, Nico, I just knew there had to be something better out there. I would chop wood, cut grass, chuck coal. Back in those days, some houses didn't have electric heat; they had to burn wood or coal, right? So
Mm,
I
mhm.
made good little money doing some of those odd yard work jobs, household type of things, of cleaning out the coal bin and that kind of thing. And I just knew there had to be something better out there for me, although I wasn't ever sure what that was. And even to the day that I actually decided to go to college, I never really knew what that was. It came to be that during my junior year, I'm sorry, during my senior year, second semester, one of my friends committed a robbery.
Mm.
He robbed a man, shot him, left him for dead, and the guy didn't die, so he ended up going to prison. And knowing that he was a very, very close friend of mine, and knowing that my father was already doing life in prison, my mother stepped to me on my way to school one day. She was on her way out the door. I was going to school, she was going to work, and she said to me, "Bryan, what are you going to do with your life?"
Mm.
She said, "You're smart, you're handsome. You don't have to get shot dead down in the street. You don't have to be in prison like your daddy. Find something to do. I don't know anything about the military or Job Corps or colleges and university. I don't know anything about these things, but there got to be something out there that you can find something to do." Scared me half to death. And to this day, I'm 53 years old. That is, from the most that I can recall, the only real conversation that we ever had. And it took all about 30 seconds on her way out the door. And so I didn't go to school that day. I laid there on the couch until I sat on the couch until I fell asleep. And by the time I woke up, school was about halfway over. I went to school the next day and there was an admission counselor there. And I asked my second period teacher if I could go hear what they had to say. And she looked at me and she said, Bryan, I didn't know you were interested in college. And I said, well, I don't know anything about college, but I would love to hear what this, young man has to share with everybody else. So I go down there and he's talking about degrees and he's talking about Greek life, fraternities, sororities, football, athletics, the whole college experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Curricular, co-curricular, and the like. And I decided that I'd go to college just after hearing him speak. His name was George. And I'll never forget it. And so I decided I'd go to college and I started applying to every college I had heard of, which is basically to say regional basketball schools, because that's all our, or football schools. That's all
Right,
we
right.
knew back in the 80s, right? ESPN had just been launched maybe 3 or 4 years before, and it wasn't the ESPN that we know today. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were just, seeing games and athletic events for the Southeast region. And so those are pretty much all the schools that I knew. And so I applied to every institution I had ever heard. And all of them said, no, you can't come. You can't be admitted because you're never going to graduate. Back in those days, they would actually give you a reason for why
Mm-hmm.
they were denying you. And when I finally did get a letter from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, my alma mater, go Mocs, I I read it over the trash can, Nico. I read it over the trash can, and because I was sure it was going to be a rejection
Another,
letter.
not, yeah, yeah.
And it was a rejection letter. But unlike all those other schools, it said that if I wasn't happy with the rejection, I could appeal the decision. And so I
Mm.
went to work. I had to walk 5 miles to Shoney's where I busted the tables, washed the dishes, and every chance I got, I'd read that letter, make sure I wasn't dreaming. Did I really see that? And so I came back home, showered, went to bed, got up the next morning. I went to the library and I pulled out a dictionary and looked up the word appeal.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I was going to understand what that letter was telling me, I had to start with that word, right? And so I looked up the word appeal, and it basically said to plead your case, to ask for reconsideration, yada, yada, yada. And I sat down in that library and I pulled out 2 pages of a spiral bound notebook and a number 2 pencil, and I wrote my appeal letter right there. And I waited and waited and waited until I heard back. And when I heard back, they said I was conditionally admitted. And the condition was I had to earn at least a 1.0 GPA in my first semester, or else I would be expelled,
Dang.
academically dismissed. Now, most students in most schools, it take years to be expelled.
Yeah.
You got to get probation, and then you get another year or so, and then you get suspension. You get another year or
Yeah.
so, and then you get expelled. I had one semester to earn a 1.0 GPA, or else I was going to be put out.
Wow, you had your back against the wall immediately.
Yeah, a little bit. I didn't have any room for mishaps. No room for mishaps.
So you literally had a very uphill climb in your educational journey.
Yeah,
And
and I was. I'm sorry.
no, no,
And
go
I was
ahead.
first generation. I was first generation, right? Father in penitentiary, mother never been to college. So I really didn't have family members that I could call and ask questions about, well, how do you do this? Because they don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget my when I started my second year of college and I filled out my application for financial aid. They called me in for verification. And they asked me, well, how is it that they asked me if I was trying to scam the federal government, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because people will sometimes change their income or change the number of people in the house and do different little things like that.
Oh,
And I
okay.
said, no. I said, no, I'm not trying to scam the government. And she said, well, how is it that your family grew exponentially between August of last year and August of this year. And I said, well, it's easy. There were four of us, my mother, myself, and two sisters. And this past summer, in the spring of 89 and summer 89, both sisters had a child. So
Mm.
now there are six of us in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, oh, okay. And then she said, well, who did this financial aid form for you? I said, I did it myself. And she said, you did this form by yourself? I said, yeah. And she said, how did you fill out this form? I said, ma'am, that was the easiest form I ever filled out. It was all zero. It was all zeros, Nico. Zero. How much money you got in the bank? Zero. Well, what's your checking account? Zero. Right? What's the value of your house? Zero. We don't own a house. What's the value of a car? Zero. We don't own a car. It was all zeros. How many? What's the value of your farming equipment? Zero. We don't have any of that, right? It was all zeros. And I said to her, I said, ma'am, you want to know what the hardest part about filling out the financial aid application was? And she said, sure, tell me. I said, getting six social security numbers from people living in the projects.
Hmm.
That was the hardest part because in the hood, you get people that put stuff in your name, right?
Yeah.
They take your social security number and they might run wild with it, right?
Yeah.
So I had to get my social security number. I had to get my mama to let me have hers and my two sisters and then their children.
Mm-hmm.
I could have went way off the rails with them numbers. you know, I could have done some things very unbecoming and probably ended up in jail or something with those numbers. And not that I'm cut from that kind of cloth, but people did that type of thing all the time where we're
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
And so getting my family members who wanted me to complete my college career and get my bachelor's degree and do all these different kind of things, but they didn't want to necessarily give me their social security number to help me do it.
Hmm.
That I said that was the hardest part about that whole form. Getting my siblings to entrust their and their children's social security number to me so that I could do, the FAFSA. Well, it wasn't FAFSA back then. We had to pay. It wasn't free. We had to actually pay for financial aid.
What?
Yeah, you had to pay to apply for financial aid back in the 80s. Absolutely.
So how was it in an aid if you had to like almost pay for your application?
You had to pay like, I don't know, $20 for the application. And then if you wanted if you wanted your data to go to different schools, there was a charge per school or something like that. Yeah, there was a charge. They didn't process any of that kind of stuff for free. Absolutely.
Dang, that's a tremendous uphill battle. Now I do think of this because there are individuals who do end up becoming academically successful. They do become financially established, and then they try to wipe away the past. They try to wipe their slate clean. Like, nah, I'm not from there. What are you talking about? What led you not only to have that right in your title, finding myself a journey from the projects to the PhD, being a powerful narrative, but what inspired you to want to share your story, and what do you hope potential readers take away from it?
Well, in the name of Tupac Shakur, right? Late great Tupac Shakur, poet extraordinaire. He had this song and he talked about it. He said, my aim is to spread more smiles than tears, utilize lessons learned from my childhood years, you know. Uh, and pretty much that's my purpose.
Hmm.
If a young person can read this and understand that they can do anything, they can do anything they put their mind to. They can do anything that they're willing to work towards. They can do anything. I oftentimes feel robbed. Now, I'm very successful by anybody's measurements, any metric that a person might want to use. I'm successful educationally. I'm
Mm-hmm.
successful emotionally, in love with my beautiful wife, and we got two very healthy, strong, smart boys. Right? Uh, we have a nice home. We're spiritually grounded. Right? Any kind of way that a person can be successful, I think I think I'm doing pretty well in those categories. And I often ask myself, how is it that I'm not a doctor, a cardiovascular surgeon? I
Mm.
mean, a medical doctor, right? Uh, a surgeon of some kind, or maybe a family practitioner, what have you. I could have done that if the education system, going back to my formative years in first,
Mhm.
second, third, fourth, fifth, if they would have invested in me and saw me as a potential doctor as opposed to a potential dropout, right?
Mm.
I probably could have been a cardiovascular surgeon. Who knows where I would have been and what I would have done. If I'm sitting here today, as a vice president for a Research One university, starting from where I started from,
Mhm.
with with the lack of support that I got
Mhm.
in formative public schools. Just think where I could have done if they'd have said, "Hey, Brian, you ever thought about medicine? You could be a doctor. You could do this, you could do that." So, sometimes those things go through my mind. But overall, I feel very blessed and very fortunate to be where I am, to have a little better life than what my parent, my mother knew, and certainly my father, who was incarcerated most of his life. To be able to provide for my boys and my wife and myself, it means the world to me.
And so what I mean by that is when somebody that typically comes from almost a background where like everybody else doesn't make it out, they don't see success as you do, they don't want to be recognized or they don't want even to be remotely anywhere near that
Oh,
conversation. But
yeah,
you are on the opposite end of the spectrum, as in, hey, I made it out of this hellhole. I made it out. You can too. What makes you want to share that with
yeah.
prospective listeners and readers?
Yeah, I can't forget Lonsdale, man. I carry Lonsdale with me everywhere I go, right? Because it was tough, but I got a lot of love out of Lonsdale, right? Like I said,
Mm.
if you needed to borrow some sugar or some
Mhm,
bread
mhm,
or something, an egg to make a cake or something, there was somebody who was in that struggle with you that understood your plight, right? So, I don't forget where I come from, and those people who do, I don't know what to say about them. I won't judge them or what have you. But for me, standing in your truth, recognizing where you come from is probably more meaningful and more authentic for young, motivating and inspiring young people than saying that you never had this problem or this challenge or this circumstance, right? That you may have been born into. I liken it to great Michael Jordan. Everybody understands he's the GOAT or one of the GOATs when we get to discussing basketball and things of that nature. But
mhm.
they also know that he got cut too, right? He,
Yeah,
you know, he was
freshman year.
he was he was cut, right? So how can you appreciate and value the greatness, the six championships and the NCAA championship with North Carolina Tar Heels and all these other kind of things, and have disdain for the fact that he was cut once, that he once was
Mm.
not regarded as being good enough, right? Some of those same things that I got out of Lonsdale that make me me, or is exactly what make me successful in college, right? Because when
Mm.
we see young people coming up who are poor, who might be black or brown or first generation or got a disability or something like that, I can relate to all of that.
Mhm.
I've been through that, right? So, yeah, it would not be fair or proper for me, nor would I ever want to disguise or camouflage or pretend that I'm not from this background and I don't have those experiences. And then too, plus it's good for some people to recognize you see me in suit, tie, bow tie. Don't get it twisted, brother. You know what I mean? don't don't let that bow tie fool you, man. You know, you know. But no, in all seriousness, yeah, that's who I am. People have to know and be able to stand in the truth. And my truth is that yeah, I'm up from the projects, man, all day, and proud of it.
And because that is your background, how do you feel about disenfranchised, low income, first generation uh, students who are right now in high school? They're listening right now and they're thinking, well, if he could do it, and that was a tremendous uphill battle, especially when you mentioned like there was no text message, no alert saying, hey, there's no class today. How do you feel about them when they're thinking, what should I do with my future, with school or go to work? How do you express to them that they have a chance, if not a better chance than you did, because there's way more tools accessible now?
Absolutely. And not only that, we didn't have text messages and emails and stuff to tell me the class was canceled. We couldn't go to class from home, right? You know,
Ah.
a lot of days, a lot of universities, you can stay right in your house and go to class and get a full degree and never
Mm-hmm.
step foot on the campus. So there are a lot of resources and technological capabilities that did not exist in 1988 when I started school. But my thing to them again is that they can do anything. And if
Mm.
they have what I call the 4 Ds, um, then they can accomplish any of their goals. And the first D is desire, right? If they have the desire, and when I say desire, I'm not talking simply just wanting something, right? You
Mm.
can want anything, but in addition to wanting it, you got to have a why. My why, when I started my quest for getting a bachelor's degree, was I wanted to live life better. Okay, coming from the projects, I wanted to know something other than pork and beans and hot dogs. You know what I'm saying, for dinner. You
Right.
know, I'm serious.
Mm-hmm.
Cornbread and pinto beans for dinner, right? You know, I wanted to know something a little bit better than how I had it. I wanted to also be able to provide for my children if I ever had any. And back in the days that I grew up in the '80s, a lot of my teenage friends had children already, right?
Mm.
As early as eighth, ninth, 10th grade. Some of them were already with children. Excuse me. So I wanted a better life. I wanted to be able to provide for my family and myself. And so when I say desire, that why it's got to be at the heart of that desire. Okay,
Mm.
there's got to be a why. If you don't have a why, you don't have desire. Okay,
Right.
you got to be determined.
Hmm.
I was determined. Nico, I can't tell you how many times I applied to places and my friends would sometimes say, man, you wasting your time. You wasting your money. Give me $15. I'll tell you no. I mean, they had all kind of jokes and stuff. And when you're growing up in the hood,
Yeah.
you crack jokes on each other for any number of different reasons. No big deal, right? Your mama this, your mama that. That's how it goes. Um, but you got to be determined. I'm talking nothing is going to turn you around. And when I was in college, I learned very quickly that some students would not go to school if the weather was really pretty. It's 85, 90 degrees outside. Man, it's too nice to be in class, right?
Hmm.
And then when the weather was bad, it's 30 degrees and it's raining. They don't want to go to school. They don't want to go to class. So they didn't want to go to class when it was raining. They didn't want to go to class when the sun was shining and things were nice. So translation, they just did not want to go to class.
At all.
They were not determined. Period. They were not determined. You got to be disciplined. You got to
Hmm.
be able to put the work in and do the work when you need to do the work. There's a saying that if you'll do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it, the time will come when you can do what you want to do when you want to do it, right?
Mhm, mhm.
But uh, sometimes you see young people and they want a BMW today, they want a Range Rover today, right?
Yeah.
Well, most of the time when you see folks with Range Rovers, they put in some hours, right? They 45, 50, 60 years old or independently wealthy or pro athletes or something.
Mhm.
They got something that they don't put in to where they are at that place to where they can drive that Range Rover, right? Young people these days, they ready to pop the hood and just roll pop in some keys or something and just roll a Range Rover immediately. And you can't do that. You got to, you got to stay disciplined. You got to do the work when you're supposed to do the work. Some of my college peers, they go to Freaknik and, college night at Six Flags and do all these different things when they should have been writing papers. They
Mm-hmm.
should have been studying, right? They didn't have the discipline. You
Mm.
know, they 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 didn't have the discipline, and it's hard to accomplish a goal when you didn't have the discipline. Uh, so I mentioned desire, discipline, determination, and dedicated. All right,
Dedicated.
you
Okay.
you got to be dedicated. And when I say dedicated, there was nothing more important to me in my PhD program, for example, than finishing the PhD. There was nothing more important to me in my college experience, undergraduate for the bachelor's degree, than getting that bachelor's, right? And by that, if I had to not do some things, for example, Freaknik coming up this weekend, and back in the day, Freaknik was a big deal, right? College
Mm-hmm.
night at Six Flags, a big deal. TSU homecoming was a big
Mm-hmm.
deal, right? Even now, you get homecomings at Alabama A&M or some of these other
Huge.
places,
Yeah.
and huge. You get 10, 20,000 people show up for that, right? And if you're not dedicated to the point to where you can say, hey, man, I can't go to homecoming this week. You know why? Because I got 3 exams next week. You know, I can't go to college night at Six Flags. I got to write 2 papers, and I got these things that I have to do. So I got to cut out some of the things that I want to do until I can get across this stage, and maybe I have a little more free time and ability to do some of those other things. Because my time will become my own. Right now, I'm on somebody else's time. They got demands on my time, right?
Mm-hmm.
They got things for me to get done in a certain time frame. So you got to have those 4 Ds: discipline, determination, dedication, and desire. You got to have them. And if you don't have those 4 Ds, it's going to be hard to accomplish anything. And while I'm on it, you got to have a little grit, growth through
I was just
resilience.
about to ask you about the grit. Give me the
Yeah, man.
grit.
Yeah, you got to have grit, growth through resilience, integrity, and tenacity. And
Mm.
growth is growth, right? You learning, you seeing things from different perspectives, you growing. And growth comes from good and bad, right? Any number of different kind of things. Sun and rain help you grow, right?
Right.
Resilience, resilience is all about that failure. I had to be resilient in all those applications for
Yeah,
undergraduate
that's your
school.
forte for sure. Yes.
I had to
Yeah.
be resilient, right? I must have been denied 50 times before I got one letter of appeal opportunity.
One maybe.
Understand
Yeah.
the one maybe. I got one maybe, and I creeped through the door with that
Yeah.
one maybe, and went all the way to the PhD. Uh, you got to learn or have the ability to master the process of trying, failing,
Mm-hmm.
learning, and re-engaging.
Mm.
That's resilience, right?
Yeah.
Right? Try, fail, learn, re-engage. And you got to have integrity, standing in your truth. You were asking me about, whether or not I still share with people that I'm from the projects, although a lot of times folks wouldn't know it. But and then again, sometimes it come out and people say, yeah, you got some hood in you, or what have you, Uh, um, you gotta be integrity. You gotta have integrity, and then tenacious. You gotta be tenacious in everything, right? You gotta stick to it. You gotta keep trying. You gotta be that knucklehead that won't quit, won't give up. You'll come back tomorrow, and just keep, because you never know how close you are to breaking through and accomplishing
Right.
the goal. The day that you quit, the day that you stop, might have been the day that you got through.
Right.
You know, so you gotta be tenacious,
And that
So go
that
ahead.
that makes me think because tenacity is so rare, especially when you were mentioning about, you're watching your peers having all these desires, but they're not tenacious. They don't have resilience. They might not have a work ethic that is anywhere near yours, but yet you're capable of delaying that gratification, that because your peers,
Absolutely.
they want that instant gratification. They're like, oh,
They
I want
do.
that car, I'm gonna get that car. What do I know how to get that? I'm gonna sell this illegally, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna take what somebody else is, I'm gonna take that risk because I want that instant gratification. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna delay the gratification, I'm gonna delay the parties, I'm gonna delay these things that in the moment it might make me feel good, but I know I want something better than that. And you have to be tenacious to say, you know what? I'm going to say no to the now. I'm going to sacrifice what I might think is going to feel good, but I know for a fact I want something better than that. How do you delay, or how did you delay all those gratifications? Because I know it wasn't just one little party that caught your attention. I know if you're a PhD from the hood, there's been countless times where you've had to delay a gratifying moment. Maybe it was after you got your bachelor's and you're like, hey, I'm all set with this bachelor's, I'm good. Or after your master's, I'm all set with this. But you've been delaying the gratification over and over and over again. How did you do that?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I did. And it goes back, Nico, even to the point of um, high school. You know, a lot of my friends were in the drug game. Some were carjacking and robbing, robbing liquor stores and convenience stores and things of that nature. And I never did those things. One, my father was in penitentiary, and he always said that trouble is easy to get into and hard to get out of, right? And so
Mhm.
you go do this crime and you got some money and you buy this car and what have you, but sooner or later that money gonna be gone and you're gonna have to keep doing those crimes, and eventually your luck gonna run out and you're gonna have these problems, and then you're gonna be in a cell next to me, you know,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. So I got that kind of information from my dad, and my stepdad was a genius too. He was real smart. He was in the streets real heavy, a kingpin, if I'm just putting it out there, and did some different things. But he always told me, you know, I don't want this for you. You're not supposed to do these things. Uh, and so when I think about the delayed gratification, it was hard, man. Like Outcast say, every job I get is cruel and demeaning. I'm sick of taking trash out and toilet bowl cleaning, right? On that get
Hmm.
out, get up, and get something cut. Uh, but the trick is understanding that if I go out here and I get this real nice car and I do some of these different kind of things, then that's going to get me off of my path. Because now I
Mm.
got this car, I either had to do something illegal to get it,
Mhm.
or I did something legal. I went out and got a job, and now I got to work all day, all night just to finance this lifestyle and be able to keep this car from being repoed and this, that, and the other. So now I can't go to school.
Hmm.
I can't go to school because I got to work 95 hours a week just to be able to keep this car. So in
Right.
essence, I got to trade in my goal of graduating college for the
Mhm.
car that I'm driving today, you know?
Mm.
And so for me, I just really took a longitudinal look at things and kind of analyze where I am today and where I hope to be. And I always wanted a BMW, and it took me, I'm telling you, from the time I was probably about 16, I wanted a BMW, and it took me, I might have been 40 when I got my BMW. My
Wow.
first one. I might have been 40. I got it in 2011. I was 41. My first one. And
You look
now I'm working.
41.
Yeah. Man, I'd give anything to be 41 again. But yeah, I got my first one in 2011. I was 41 years old. And then, probably about 7, 8 years after that, I got a second one. So I'm on my second one. And and the thing is, I don't have to worry about the penitentiary to drive it.
Hmm.
I don't have to worry about anybody pulling me over and asking me, what I do to be able to afford the car. And I had some nice cars back in the day. In college, I had a Mazda RX-7, and it was beautiful. And
Yeesh.
truth be told, I got that out of a crap game. I was shooting. shooting crap, and came up on a big lick one day and won several thousands of dollars. And I went straight to the car lot and bought me a nice car. I had been walking for so long and driving them hoopties, man, that
Mhm.
man, I'm getting me a car. And so I went and got me an RX-7. But by and large, um, yeah, I knew if I got pulled over by the police and I'm driving a BMW or a Porsche or Corvette, some of my friends had nice cars like that. Uh, it was a one-way ticket to jail.
Right, right. Now, as an advocate for at-risk students, what strategies do you think are most effective in recruiting and retaining these students in higher education? Or essentially, what strategies do you think would have been most effective in your case when you were applying to these schools to retain top tier quality students such as yourself?
Wow. I gotta say it like this. A lot of students who may be at risk, first generation students, whether they're from the projects like me, whether they're financially or physically challenged like me, right? Low income, I said physically, financially challenged. But a lot of them don't know enough about the college game, and they don't know enough about their own strengths and weaknesses, right?
Mm, mhm,
So when I think about strategies, first know thyself. When you come up on a college campus and you get in there, know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. I wasn't doing chemistry.
mhm.
I
Okay.
knew I could. I couldn't do chemistry, and when I say I couldn't, I didn't have the desire. I didn't have the discipline for it. I didn't have the dedication. Right.
Same.
I didn't have the determination. There were things I just wasn't interested in doing. Now,
Right.
had they put that on me from first, second grade, maybe I could have arrived at college with a different mindset. But by
Correct.
the time I got there, I didn't know anything about chemistry. Never heard of it. So. Uh, I need to know what my strengths are. And if I decide I want to be a chemist, or if I decide I want to be a doctor or whatever, and I need to take biology, then I need to understand what that takes to get through those classes. What is going to mean in terms of the amount of studying I'm going to have to do, the amount of papers I'm going to have to write, research and tests I'm going to have to take, and some of those kind of things, and what I'm going to have to give up.
Hmm.
And I can make a conscious, informed decision that, yeah, I'm ready, I'm willing to do those things so I can be a doctor. So first, know thyself. Knowing how to take notes. When you sit in the class for the very first time and it's a college class and that professor going through 40 pages in an hour, and you don't know what's important and what's not important. And sometimes you just sitting there and listen, dumbfounded, just in awe. Or you might
Mhm.
be really paying attention and listening to the story. You meaningfully engaged, but you ain't taking good notes. You're not taking effective notes. You don't know what to write down. You don't know what's important and what's not. And so by the time you get to the test, you went to class, but you can't tell anything about what happened in class. You understand? Uh,
Mhm.
so helping young people understand these different little dilemmas and nuances that raise their head. Time management. You know how many people flunked out just because they thought, well, I'm I'm grown. I ain't got to be in the my mama back in Memphis, right? My mama 6 hours away from here. She don't know what time I go to bed or what time nowadays you probably can't do that because people can put a tracker on your phone and know if you at home or if you in Nashville, they can get a good idea about your location and stuff, right?
Mhm.
But back in those days when I went to college, if I didn't come home till 3 in the morning, my mother didn't know anything.
Right.
We still had long distance phone calls. You understand? You
Pay
couldn't,
for
you
those,
couldn't,
yeah.
yeah, man, you had to pay per minute for a long distance phone call. So, but time management, getting back to the point, knowing how to manage their time, when they're working, when they are going to be in class, when are they going to study, when are they going to wash clothes, when are they going to eat, right? When are they gonna, most of the time they're gonna court somebody, a boyfriend, girlfriend, somebody, right? They're gonna, you know, you got to be able to manage that time because now you're the boss
Yeah.
and the time is your own. And if you neglect something, then you just neglect it. The professor not gonna come to the door and say, "Hey, you didn't come to class." right?
Mm-mm.
So all of
They
those
get their
things,
money already.
they, all of those things have to be shared with young people coming into college. And you can't do that over a weekend orientation. You can't do
Hmm.
that in 1 week orientation. That's a whole semester process. I, I mean, I've seen people get to like week 6 or 7 and don't know where the health services is. And then all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden they come up with mono, right? They come up with mono and they don't know where to go.
Right.
You know, so you got to give them that full orientation to help them understand themselves, their strengths, their weaknesses, opportunities for improvement, things of that nature, the resources that are there for them, how to take notes, how to study, how to take a test. I mean, really how to take a test, how to say if it's multiple choice that this answer right here, D, isn't even possible, right?
Mm.
When did Christopher Columbus discover America? And you got 1492, 1972, right? 1612 and 1314. We should know that 1972 is not the correct answer, right?
Right.
We should know that America has been in existence for hundreds and hundreds of years and not 50 years, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you learn those test taking strategies, at the very minimum, you just improve your probability of getting that question right by 25%.
Mm-hmm.
Don't mean you get it right, but
Right.
you improve the probability by just knowing that 1972 was not the correct answer.
Right.
Those type of things, it's a lot. And it's going to be something very different, Nico, from one student to the next. I might need more of the test taking strategies, note taking strategies. You might need more of the socially apt and
Hmm.
adept type of things, right? Well, you don't do if you're not a Q dog, don't go hopping in that line. You know, don't do nothing like that. If you're not a football player, don't go eating the cat in the football calf because that's for football players, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the can do's and whatnot of the social scene. That was the real lesson for me in
Social
college.
awareness like that.
Man, yeah, college wasn't hard for me. The graduate school wasn't hard. The PhD wasn't hard. What was hard was getting into those programs. The
Hmm.
real education for me, though, was learning that we were all different and the same.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We were all unique in our culture and our experiences, whether they were from Atlanta or Birmingham or Memphis or Nashville or Detroit or Chicago. I mean, we had students from everywhere, North Carolina, North Kakalaki, South Kakalaki. They were from everywhere, right? We were all different, but we were all the same too, because we're here trying to get a college degree. We are all African American, or we're all college students or first generation. And though we're not the same race and ethnicity, we got the likeness of being first timers in college, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody we can call and ask questions of, right? Our family, our mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and cousins, none of them have been to school to kind of help us guide us through these things. And it's not like elementary school and junior high and high school. By the time you get to middle school or high school, your big brother been running them halls for a couple of years. He got you.
Right.
You know, oh no, when you come to college now, no, and your brothers, your mother, and your father, they ain't been here before. They don't know this. You fresh meat, you new time. You know what I'm saying? And you got some things to learn. You might have some things to unlearn.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't do that here, right? You can't do that, bro. Don't do that. You know. So it's a lot, man. But when you give those students this type of education and help them learn how to navigate the landmines and learn about themselves and prepare them for what's ahead, they will succeed every time. Every
Now,
time.
now, I did also want to touch base because you mentioned it a few times, which was the financial aspect. In your personal view, not in your institutional view or your employment view, but in your personal view, how do you think educational institutions can alleviate the burden that students have from student loan debt, from, as you mentioned, managing food, managing washing clothes? Like a lot of people that don't understand, like, this is not free. You got to pay for this. And some students are completely ignorant to how the world works, and they just sign on the dotted line, not understanding you have these ramifications that are going to bite you afterwards. And how do you perceive that?
First of all, you may not know, but I wrote my dissertation for my doctorate degree on student loan debt. I did.
Perfect
I, I,
question.
I most certainly did. So my take on that is students have to be educated about what all this means.
Hmm.
And this is not scholarship, it's not aid, it's a loan. Okay. We're talking about loans here. Scholarships, financial aid, you don't have to pay that back.
Hmm.
Loans you do. And not only do you have to pay them back, but by federal law, they can charge you up to 10% of the gross of your monthly income. So if you make $3,000 a month, they can charge you up to $300 a month
Wow.
out of your income. And the fact that they say guaranteed student loan, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to get it. It means you're guaranteed to pay it back,
Mm.
right? And you might say, well, how am I guaranteed to pay it back? Well, just work a job anywhere in these United States or its territory, and your income can be, um, or what they call it, where they take the money out your check. I'm losing my I'm losing my vernacular at the moment,
It's
but
like
if
how
you
child support is. It automatically gets
yeah,
deducted.
automatically deducted out of your check. They can do that, right? You can either voluntarily make the payment or they
Hmm.
can take it out of your check, right? They can take your
Wow.
income taxes. They're gonna get their money, lest
That's
you
some.
be dead or in prison. So that's what guaranteed student loan means. So to answer your question, I believe it's important for institutions to not only educate students, but why is it that students are allowed to go 60, 70, 80, $90,000 in debt for a college education?
Hmm.
There should be a cap on that. Now, I'm not saying take away loans. I had $19,659 in student loan debt. I got a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD for those $19,659. Okay.
Wow.
So I'm not saying take away student loans. I'm saying we got to teach students how to use those loan products responsibly. I have seen many of my fraternity brothers and other students, not only in my professional career, but even as an undergraduate, where people will take out a loan and pledge a fraternity or pledge a sorority.
Hmm.
They take out a loan and they buy an automobile. They take out a loan and they buy really, really nice clothes and shoes, and they look really nice. And they are essentially financing a lifestyle that they're going to pay back the next 30, 40 years
Yeah.
after they graduate from school or drop out of school. Okay. So, what I think needs to be done is that the loans help you go to school, and the maximum amount you can get is the cost of your tuition, fees, room, board, books, that kind of thing. All right. Some people will say, well, they got to live,
Hmm.
so and they got to get deodorant and they got to do some of these other kind of things, and that's not wrong.
Hmm.
But okay, how about work a job 2 3 hours a day, 10 hours a week on the weekends or something, right?
Hmm.
That's what I did. I bust tables and washed dishes till I was 23 years old. Every chance I got, I go back to Shoney's. I put that nasty apron on, right? And you got no props for doing this job. You understand that, right? I'm the guy that comes out and take your dishes off the table, clean the seats, mop the floors, wash the dishes in the back, clean the bathrooms, all that kind of thing. But it gave me $3.35 an hour for every hour that I worked, and I could use those monies
Hmm.
to, to buy deodorant, to buy toothpaste, to do a little something. I wasn't balling by anybody's definition. Okay, I was a scrub. All right, I was a straight scrub if ever there was one. But I didn't have to borrow. I didn't have to borrow above and beyond what it took me to stay in school. And a lot of students, that's what they do. That's what they do. Now, some students need to, you
Mhm.
know, I'm from the projects. You heard me say that a million times. So
Mhm.
don't get into it. Don't get it twisted. Some people need to borrow a little bit so they can send mom a dollar or two, pay some rent, pay some bills, or that kind of thing. And I struggle with that. I'm powerfully conflicted with that. In fact, I don't know if there's a greater conflict within me. I think that's a good thing, but I also think it sets them up for a problem in their future years. When they have to pay this loan back and maybe they don't have the income to make the ends meet, and they start to question, oh man, was this loan really worth it? Did I
Mhm.
do a good thing by borrowing this money to go to college? Well, they see the college piece, but they don't see the Freaknik. They don't see the pledging of the sorority or the fraternity. They don't see all the clothes and all the ways that they use those monies and expense those monies that really didn't have much to do with going to college. You know, Going to college is about paying those fees, getting those books, and everything that it takes you to satisfy the requirements for a bachelor's degree. And some people say that's inseparable from other living things that you have to
Mhm.
do. And I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying there are other ways to take care of those things to where you don't have to borrow money to do it. You know.
And because you were able to do that, and you have literally one of the best examples of somebody that grinded, as you mentioned, as a scrub, grinded. There's no shine. You don't get, flowers for doing that. You're doing the nitty dirty work. I understand because I went to I went to get an associate's degree, and I had to work full time, and I went to school full time, and nobody was gonna tell me otherwise. I was a first generation graduate in my family, and so I completely understand you have to grind. But now that you're on this side of the table of the educated side, you're on the side of you have almost the opportunities to make some of these rules or explain some of these rules to students. How do you think or feel about when students say that it's not fair that you have to get a loan? How do you feel when they say that you have to get a free education, that it should be extended to college, to masters, to PhDs? And you're like, well, I was doing the dirty work. I did it. You could do it too. Why are you being complacent with it? How do you feel about those individuals that are raising that argument?
I'm not opposed to free education. I'm
Mm.
not. Education used to be free, as I understand it, at one time. Public education for sure. Uh, so I'm not opposed to free education, but until that day comes, right, then we got to work within the confines of the reality that we have, and that reality is not free higher education. So you got to use, or I would advise students to use the resources and leverage those resources that are there to help you and support you today, right? And
Mhm.
you're going to be in a much better situation 10 years from now, having gone through and received a bachelor's or maybe a master's or maybe a PhD, than you would be without doing those things. I mean, there's no question about it. I am living pretty well today. And none of these things that I am able to enjoy or the things that I'm able to do would be remotely possible if I did not get the bachelor's, the master's, and eventually the PhD. Now, some
Mm.
people will not need a PhD, right?
Mhm.
Some people will only need a master's degree. Some people won't need a master's degree. A bachelor's degree will do it. But you are going to need some higher education. You are going to have to learn some new skills.
Mhm.
We got AI and technology churning every day, and the things that you know today may be obsolete 40 years from now, 30 years from now. So you have to become this independent, lifelong learner. Okay. You can go back and you can sharpen your saw. You can go back and, I mean, think about sports, right?
Mhm.
Michael Jordan played basketball for years, years. He reached the epitome of basketball heaven and whatever there is
The
with number six
pinnacle.
championship, the pinnacle. That's right. With six championships and the like, and then all of a sudden basketball was gone.
Hmm.
He can't keep playing back as good as he was. He can't keep playing, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had to have something else to do, right? So he went and bought a basketball team. Right, he got into the management, operations, and ownership side of the house, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
same thing is true with us. We may not always be able to do what we like to do, what we want to do, what we're born to do, what our passion and our calling may be. But we can be lifelong learners to where I can always learn something new. I can become well-rounded and grounded in something that make myself continuously viable, continuously relevant. Okay. You can't just look past me because I'm more than a one-trick pony, you know. And
Mm.
that's what education does for young people. That's why you need it. Not only do you have a competency of a certain field of endeavor or
Mm-hmm.
discipline or what have you, but you have the ability to think critically, to learn, to master new things. That's what education demonstrates, or that's what the degree certifies, that you can do those kind of things. And you're going to have to keep doing them whether you want to or not. Even if you go open your own business as a plumber, you learn a trade, this you're going to have to go get licensed and bonded and do all that kind of stuff over and over and over again, right? You don't just learn how to be a plumber and that's it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-mm.
right? And you plumb for the rest of your life. Well, practices and codes and laws change,
Right.
and you got to learn the new stuff and how to do this. And we're not using copper pipes anymore. We're using PEX piping, right?
Right.
All over the country. And if you're working from a 1972 education or whatever, then maybe you're not up to speed in plumbing best practices, and know who's going to hire you.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think going to school is great, whether it's an associate's, a bachelor's, or what have you, and it demonstrates that you can learn some things, you can think critically, you can apply what you have learned, right? And you're gonna always have to keep learning, keep reinventing yourself, or keep sharpening that saw. You're never gonna be able to say I'm through learning and I'm just gonna go through the rest of my life and what comes comes.
And as we finalize, what legacy would you like to leave, not just your family, not just your alma mater, the schools that you went to, but for those that feel that when they hear your story, that they're like, wow, I'm in this predicament. How do you want them to remember you much long afterwards? Like, what kind of legacy do you want them to see when they hear or read about you?
My my biggest point of pride, if I can say it that way, my biggest point of pride is not that I got a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD. That's not what I want people to know about me. My biggest point of pride, my legacy, I think, is unquestionably the fact that there are thousands of people who are doing what they love, who are doctors, nurses, lawyers, clergy, teachers, educators, contractors, builders, right? Architects, you name it, in every field of human endeavor, who are doing what they love, who are providing for their families, who are taking care of themselves and doing it at a very high level because somebody like me understood what it was to be a first generation student, to be a multicultural, racial, ethnic, diverse student walking the college campus for the very first time with no one to call back home, no way to go home for Thanksgiving break because I don't have a car. And I have to figure out whom among these 10,000 students might give me a ride 160 miles away from home. Because if I can't get a ride, nobody's coming for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Or Christmas holiday, right? My legacy is without question the people I have been able to help and enjoy the fruits of their labor and the successes that they have put towards the fabric of this society, just because people like me are in the kind of roles that I've been able to serve in. When I think about Benjamin Roethlisberger, for example, you know the name?
Benjamin Roethlisberger sounds familiar. Yes.
Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback.
Okay. Yep. Yep. Yep.
I admitted him.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, I admitted him. I admitted
What?
him. Yeah, I admitted him to college, and I was his first academic advisor that he had at Miami University, Oxford, Ohio.
Big Ben?
Big Ben, that's right. And so he went on to not only do very well at Miami University, but win 2 Super Bowls in Pittsburgh, and it's probably going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, right?
Mm-hmm.
The boy who washed dishes all his life, who was rejected from college admissions, who scored a 12 on ACT, right? That guy admitted that man.
Yeah.
You understand? When I think about another young lady, her name is Aziza Nicholson, and she lives in Cleveland, Ohio, and she's Raw Beauty. If you get a chance, look up Raw Beauty on the internet. That's her company. She makes all these different cosmetic products and things for women, primarily. Um, she's doing her own thing, and as a college student, in a freshman college student, and on up to the day she graduated, okay, people were saying to her, "Don't do hair. Why are you doing hair? You at this college and you paying all this money. You could have just did hair on your own. You know what I mean?" And this, that. But she learned not only how to do hair, how to make products, how to run a business, and do all these different kind of things. And now, she has her own business in Cleveland, Ohio, and doing very, very well. Millionaire. And she is where she is with just a little bit of help from somebody like me. Okay. Now she did the work.
Yeah.
Please no, I'm not stealing her thunder. I'm not taking her credit.
Mm-mm,
She did
mm-mm.
the work. She went to class. She studied. She did all these different kind of things. She wrote the paper. She took the exams. She did the work. But when it came time for policies and questions and issues and concerns that hit students in that particular demographic the hardest, somebody like me was there to say, wait a minute, this is not equitable. This is not right. This is what we need to do for this particular student, because this
Mm.
student doesn't have a car. So you want her to take classes over here 5 miles away, but she doesn't have a car. How's she supposed to get there? We need to offer
Mm.
that class right here on this campus so that this
Right.
student can participate, right? So when I think about all of those individuals who are now practicing medicine, organ transplants, delivering babies, doing any number of different kind of things. Some are in the clergy, some are authors, some have doctorate degrees. I got one student who's down in Miami now, and he's selling real estate. I'm sorry, Orlando, Florida, and he's selling real estate and doing extremely well. I mean, very, very well. If you were to turn on MTV Cribs or something like that, you might see him on TV and use, hey, I was his advisor. I admitted him in
Mm.
school. I admitted him to the university. I advised him all 4 years until he graduated, 5 years or whatever time it took. Just knowing that I had a very, very small part in helping them accomplish their goals. That's my legacy. That's
Ooh.
my legacy.
Ooh. Okay, I got one. This is the last question, I
Take
promise. It
take
is a multi-layered.
take your time.
It's a
I'm
multi-layered.
not in a hurry. Go ahead.
It is a multi-layered question. So as a black man in America, what is the kind of advice that you give to your sons who are also coming up? One, and two, what would be the difference that you would have wanted your father had he had the opportunity to give you many, many years ago as well? So what is the kind of things that you give to your sons? Because we may have other single parent household children listening, and they want to hear, what does this uber successful African American man gives to his children, but also what would you have given to yourself when you were on the come up as well?
Wow. Um, uh, Speaking of my boys, I got a 26-year-old. He's graduated with a bachelor's degree, working in Knoxville, Tennessee, doing well. Um, and then I got a 14-year-old. And when we have our man to boy talks, okay, man to boy, right?
Yeah.
I always make sure that they understand that American society can build as many prisons as they like. Their duty, their responsibility to themselves is to make sure those prisons stay empty. And if they
Mm-hmm.
can't stay empty, at the bare minimum, you're not in one. You're not in one. Okay. There's too much out here that you can do in terms of working, education, athletics, any number of different kind of uh, fields of dreams, if you will, that you can go into to where you don't have to be incarcerated. All right. That's first. We always talk about engaging the police, or when the police choose you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, where you put your hands, how you talk, what you don't say, excuse me, things of that nature. And not that you're wrong, but for me, it's more important that you are alive than it
Right.
is that you are right. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they may violate your rights. I don't know. Maybe you were speeding. Okay. Uh, they may violate your rights. They may not violate your rights. But at the end of the day, I need you alive. You know,
Right.
a dead young man isn't hurt helping anyone, least of all the dead young man. So let's do the kind of things that are going to de-escalate the situation and make sure that you can come home at the end of the night. So we have those conversations. Now the 14-year-old isn't driving, and for the most part, my wife or myself is taking him almost everywhere. We're practically his limo driver or his private Ubers or whatever at this point. So we talk about those things, but we also talk about, hey, you're thinking about today. I need you to think about 2075, 40, 50,
Mm.
40, 50 years down the road, where you
Right.
want to be. How you going to live when it's time for you to retire? Will your house be paid for? Will your cars be paid for? Will you have enough money, right? Are you saving? Are you saving 10%, 20%, 30% of your monthly income? If your tire gets flat tomorrow, do you have enough money to go put that tire back on the car, or do you need to call somebody? And if you
Mm.
need to call somebody, who are you going to call? Right? Because
Mm.
not only do they have to have the money, but they got to be willing to give it to you.
Right.
Right? That's a tall order, right? First, you got to find
Yeah.
somebody that got the money, and they got to be willing to give it to you, or else it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
If any one
Right.
of those two things don't work out, you wasted your call, right?
Right.
So you got to be a self-sufficient individual. You got to grow. Like New Edition said, these are the things that change boys to men. You got to be in that kind of position where you don't have to call mama, you don't have to call daddy. If your girlfriend puts you out the house, where you going? Right? You
Hmm.
got to be able to take care of yourself, and you can't do that if you're not saving money, if you're not preparing for the rainy day, because the rain is going to come. It's coming.
Yes.
So we have those kind of conversations. I talk to them about education and ensuring that they are readying themselves. And the hardest part about being a young man, and particularly a young black man, okay, is that you have to make good, conscious, informed decisions
Hmm.
today, right now, in order to be prepared for 15 years down the road. And you don't know what that's
Hmm.
going to be like. You don't know what's going to happen. You can't get a late start in this. You can't wake up 10 years down the road and decide, oh, I want to be a veterinarian, right? And you haven't taken any biology, you haven't taken any anatomy, right? You haven't done any of those
Hmm.
type of things to prepare you for being a veterinarian. Now, you can still do it,
Right, right.
right? You can still do it, but it's going to be hard because all those people who are trying to be veterinarians, they're gonna be way down the road in their knowledge and understanding the concepts and body parts and tissues and cells and veins and arteries and all that kind of thing. So, you know, the challenge is taking today and just having some kind of idea of where it is you might want to go, where it is you might want to be. Now, you can change your mind and say, well, I don't want to be a veterinarian. I want to be a cardiovascular surgeon. And you're still in the medicine field. Or maybe I won't do be a doctor. Maybe I want to do a pharmaceutical salesperson or a doctorate in pharmacy or something, right? I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
be a pharmacist or whatever, right? But you can't and you should not wait 15 years or something, get way down the road and decide you want to go into something totally new. And that's hard for young people. It's especially hard for black males. And the example I gave my 14-year-old, he's a bit of a golfer. I said, well, when you think about athletes, did LeBron James just wake up and decide he was going to be a GOAT? Or did
Mm-hmm.
he start playing basketball when he was like 5 years old?
Mm-hmm.
He started when he
Mm-hmm.
was about 5 years old, didn't he? And he worked his way up to the LeBron James that we know now. They got
Yeah.
videos and commercials of Steph Curry when he was about 3 or 4 years old after playing basketball, right?
Yeah.
So he started from a long time back, understanding and envisioning that he wanted to do this thing. Now he can change his mind. He can do something else if he wants to, but what he didn't do is wait till he was 18, 19 years old and go try to make the team
Mm-hmm.
at Davidson College. He didn't do that, right? He learned
No.
his craft and he sharpened his saw in his younger years so that when he got up in age, he was ready. So we have those conversations, and sometimes it's hard to reach young brothers, even in my house, because they don't always understand. And the point I try to uh, get them to realize or come to is you don't always have to understand something to do it.
Mm.
If you trust just a little bit that somebody
Mm-hmm.
like myself, or if there's a listener on this pod right now, maybe you got a mother or a father or a cousin or uncle who tells you something and you don't really understand. My question is, do you trust? If
Mm.
if you trust that this person is guiding you right, is giving you the best advice that they possibly can give you with everything that they know about whatever that subject may be, that's all you need. You don't have to understand. Just trust.
Right.
Trust.
And what advice would you have
Oh,
given
that's
yourself?
that's right. Um, I would have told myself I could do anything. I would have told myself probably about as early as the second or third grade I could do anything. I was that kind of kid, Nicole. Um, Came to be one day in 1976, first grade. It was so cold outside that they canceled school. No snow, just cold. I think it was five
Mhm.
below zero. Five below zero. And my grandmother told me, Brian, you ain't got to go to school today. School canceled. The teachers had told me that school never cancels, with the exception of Saturday, Sundays, holidays, in the summer, right? It wasn't a Saturday
Mhm.
or Sunday, it wasn't a holiday, and it wasn't summer. So school is in session. And I had perfect attendance. And the only way you could go see the animals at the zoo and that kind of thing, you had to have perfect attendance, you had to have good citizenship, or you had to be on the
Yeah.
honor roll. And I knew
Mhm.
I wasn't going to be on the honor roll, right? Straight A's, that ain't happening. Uh, I knew I wasn't going to have perfect citizenship. I grew up in the projects. There's always somebody messing with you, and you got to, clap back at them, right? You got to come back on
Right.
them. But I could go to school every day.
Hmm.
I could go to school every day. And that was my goal. I'm gonna have perfect attendance at the end of the year, and I'm gonna go on this field trip, and I'm gonna see this African bush elephant named Big Diamond, right? And so she tried her best to tell me that school was closed, but I ain't hearing it. I walked to school half mile, get there, school closed. and I'm freezing. They will not let me in. And I'm crying, freezing, or whatever. And the man looked at me and said, "Your mama didn't tell you school was closed?" And about that time, my chin hit the floor. It really was closed, right? And so I go back home and I stick my hand in some hot water, and that was a bad idea. And I cry myself to sleep. And from that point on, whatever she said about school was the gospel truth, right? So if somebody had given me the advice that I could do anything, you want to be president of the United States, you can do that, but this is what you got to do. You want to be
Mm-hmm.
a doctor, you can do that, but this is what you got to do, right? Uh, you know, you can do anything. So, Bryan, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? What would you do if you knew you were going to be successful? I mean, what would that be? You know, instead of trying to be Batman or Superman and fly through the air, that kind of stuff, like you saw in the cartoons and
Mm-hmm.
Silver Surfer and all that kind of stuff. Maybe I'd have said, I'm be an astronaut and I'm going to be, I'm going to go to the moon. I'm going to go, on the next space shuttle or Apollo or whatever it is that they're calling it these days, right? Uh, if somebody had put that bug in my ear, who knows where I'd be with it. And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying I'm not happy now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying I probably could have did so much more or gone so much further, Who knows?
No, I totally understand that. Could have somebody would have given me that, I probably would have pursued archaeology to try to dig up the past history, but instead I went into computer engineering because I like computers.
What?
With that said, I do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself, promote your website, and promote your books and anything else that you do have to offer.
Oh wow, thank you, Nicole. You're too kind. I just would generally say to your listeners, it's been my pleasure to speak with you, Nicole. I love it when we have an opportunity to vibe like this and learn from and with each other. And if there are individuals who need or would like a good read for aspirants of all ages, I would encourage you to consider and purchase my book, Finding Myself: A Journey from the Projects to the PhD. It is a true coming of age story about myself and some of the obstacles and barriers that I've gone through, and how young people can um, sidestep some of the landmines and hopefully see themselves credibly in the story of myself trying to get to the PhD. My website is www.findingmyself.org. That's www.finding.myself. Excuse me, www.findingmyself, findingmyself.org, findingmyself.org. And there you can learn a little bit more about who I am as a professional, some of the places I've been, papers I've written, conferences I've spoken at, the book itself. There's some information about the book, and you can also purchase the book. We ship it anywhere in the continental United States or the Alaska or Hawaiian territories or states as well. If there's anybody listening in those areas, we'd be more than happy and love to just ship you a copy of the book. So that's about all I have.
Perfect. Everything I put on screen, just in case. So if you're audio only, check out on YouTube. That wraps up another insightful episode of A Gamer's Guide to Productivity. Once again, with our amazing guest, Dr. Bryan Samuel. You heard his journey, you heard the wisdom, the knowledge that he provided, and you heard his commitment to education that he exuded and is leaving us with multiple so many valuable lessons. So if you value this, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because this is what I love. I love getting this firsthand experience of this wondrous information. Again, check out his website, findingmyself.org. If you really, really want to support him, also consider getting his book, Finding Myself: A Journey from the Project to the PhD. Once again, thank you for joining us today. Remember, guys, your goals are achievable no matter where you start, but If you are disenfranchised, if you are black, brown, or first generation, much better to do it sooner rather than later because it makes it easier to gain experience the younger you are and the sooner that you start. So until next time, stay productive, keep leveling up in life. It is Nico Pinkin of A Gamer's Guide to Productivity signing off.